They say power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. But what does it reveal when a man born to rule the world begins to believe he is a god? He was once Rome's golden child, adored by soldiers, loved by the people, the symbol of everything noble in the empire. Yet in just 4 short years, he plunged that empire into terror, humiliation, and chaos. He made senators crawl, turned temples into shrines of himself, and declared war on the sea. His name became a curse whispered through time. Caligula. Was he truly mad, or just the only man honest enough to show Rome its own madness? Because behind the marble statues and the shining crown stood a frightened child raised among monsters until he became one. This is the story of how a beloved prince became the most dangerous god Rome ever created. Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, the boy the world would one day call Caligula, was born into greatness in 12 AD. His father, Germanicus, was a war hero, noble, charismatic, the people's general. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, the proud granddaughter of Augustus himself. The blood of Rome's founding dynasty ran in his veins. He grew up not in palaces, but in army camps, where soldiers adored the bright-eyed child who marched beside them in tiny boots and armor. They nicknamed him Caligula, Little Boots, the child mascot of Rome's legions. He was raised amid the thunder of marching feet, the clash of steel, and the songs of victory, a childhood steeped in glory and the expectation that he would one day rule the world. But Rome's royal blood was a blessing and a curse. When Germanicus died mysteriously in the east, whispered to be poisoned by Emperor Tiberius, grief turned to fury. Agrippina openly accused the emperor of murder. The Senate fell silent. The gods looked away, and Rome's most beloved family began to vanish one by one. Agrippina was exiled, her sons imprisoned and starved. Caligula, still barely a teenager, watched the world devour his family. Then came the call to Capri, a glittering prison where Emperor Tiberius ruled over oceans of corruption. There, surrounded by luxury and horror, Caligula learned his first lesson of survival. To live in the court of power, you must wear a mask. He saw the cruelty of emperors, the fragility of mercy, and the price of fear. In the silence of that island, the seeds of madness began to grow. In 37 AD, Emperor Tiberius died. Some say smothered, others say naturally. But when the news reached Rome, the streets erupted in joy. The people shouted one name, Caligula. At 24, the boy who once played among soldiers was now emperor of the greatest power on earth, the golden heir of Germanicus. Young, handsome, smiling, and generous, his first months were radiant. He freed political prisoners, ended the dreaded treason trials, paid debts, honored the dead. He even brought back the ashes of his mother and brothers, carrying them himself through the streets of Rome. Tears filled the eyes of senators. The people adored him. Rome had found its savior, or so they thought. Then, without warning, calamity struck. Caligula fell gravely ill, feverish, delirious, near death. Rome prayed day and night for his recovery. Temples overflowed with offerings. Weeks later, he rose from his bed. The people cheered. But something inside him had changed. The man who recovered was not the man who had fallen sick. He began to lash out, suspecting treachery in every shadow. He ordered the execution of his co-heir, young Gemellus, barely a boy. Those who had once been allies became targets. Historians would later write that his sickness unhinged his mind. Others believe it simply tore away the mask, revealing what power had already created. The savior of Rome was gone. In his place stood a god or a demon, clothed in imperial purple. Caligula declared himself more than a ruler. He declared himself divine. He ordered temples built in his name, statues of himself placed in holy sanctuaries. In Judea, his demand to install his likeness in the temple nearly sparked a rebellion. He merged his palace with the temple of Jupiter itself so that he could walk directly from his bedchamber to the house of the gods. He spoke to Jupiter as an equal, and he expected Rome to kneel. Those who refused were punished, not for treason, but for blasphemy. He began signing documents not as emperor, but as Neos Helios, the new sun. For Caligula, the line between man and God had vanished. In his mind, Rome was no longer his empire, it was his altar. And in that new religion, cruelty became worship. Banquets that defied reason, pearls dissolved in wine, gold flakes sprinkled on meat, guests forced to laugh as senators' wives were dragged away and returned humiliated. humiliated. He invited noblemen to dinner, then watched their faces as their sons were executed in the arena. Rome's treasury bled dry to fund endless games and orgies of spectacle. He called them entertainment. The Senate called them madness. He even joked about making his horse, Incitatus, a consul, a cruel jest to show the Senate that even an animal could rule better than them. But behind the mockery was a message. Only Caligula decided who was worthy and who was nothing. He ruled with laughter and fear, and to him they were the same thing. Then came perhaps his most infamous act. In 40 AD, Caligula led his army to the northern coast of Gaul, declaring war on Neptune, the god of the sea. The legions marched to the edge of the world, waiting for battle, but no enemy appeared. Instead, Caligula ordered his soldiers to attack the waves and collect seashells as the spoils of victory. Was it madness or a masterstroke of satire, a way to humiliate the generals who doubted him? We'll never know. But in that moment, even his army realized the terrifying truth. Their emperor had become untouchable by man or by reason. Paranoia became his companion. He saw enemies in every corner, traitors in every whisper. He revived the treason trials that he once abolished. He executed his brother-in-law, banished his sisters, and watched friends die with cold amusement. He lined his palace walls with mirrors, saying he wished to see the back of his own neck, the spot where every Roman emperor feared the knife. Caligula lived in luxury but slept in terror, because deep down he knew what he had done to others could one day be done to him. January 41 AD.
Caligula had spent the morning at the theater, laughing loudly through the plays, applauding himself as Rome's living deity. Afterward, he wandered the palace halls, unguarded, unafraid, drunk on his own divinity. In the shadows waited the Praetorian Guard, men who had sworn to protect him, led by Cassius Chaerea, a soldier Caligula once mocked as woman voice. As the emperor passed, Chaerea struck the first blow to the neck, then another, then 20 more. Caligula collapsed, gasping, his final words lost beneath the fury of steel. Nearby, his wife and infant daughter were cut down. The marble corridors ran red. The god of Rome had fallen. The empire stood silent. In just 4 years, Caligula's reign had risen like a star and burned out like a curse. The Senate erased his name from monuments, his memory condemned. For centuries, he has remained the face of insanity, the tyrant who mocked God and men alike. Yet modern historians ask, was he truly mad or simply the victim of Rome's most powerful smear campaign? Much of what we know comes from enemies, men he humiliated, senators he terrified, historians who wrote after his death. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. A man scarred by loss, shaped by cruelty, trapped inside the golden cage of absolute power. Because power doesn't just reveal who you are, it reveals what you might become. Caligula, the little boy in soldier's boots, became the emperor who tried to outshine the god and ended as a warning whispered through the ages. Let them hate me so long as they fear me. He ruled for 4 short years, yet 2,000 years later, his name still echoes through marble halls. Caligula, Rome's fallen god, a reminder that even the brightest crowns can hide the darkest mind.